Thank you for always coming back to watch. Here is a compilation you'll love.
In the early 1990s, in a small cafe in Edinburgh, Scotland, a young mother sat with a sleeping baby beside her, writing in longhand on scraps of paper. She had no stable income, no certainty about tomorrow, no assurance that anyone would ever read her work. But inside her mind lived a boy wizard, and that imagination would soon change literature forever. This is a true story of struggle, persistence, imagination, and success. The journey of J.K. Rowling, once a single mother surviving on welfare, who became one of the most successful authors in history. Joanne Rowling was born on July 31st, 1965, in Yate, Gloucestershire, England. From an early age, she loved stories. Her parents, Peter and Rowling, encouraged reading, and books filled their home. Joanne often invented stories, telling them to her younger sister, Diane. At just 6 years old, she wrote her first story about a rabbit named Rabbit. Storytelling became her escape, her comfort, her playground. But life was not always easy. Her relationship with her father grew complicated over time, and her mother began suffering from multiple sclerosis, a disease that slowly weakens the body. Young Joanne watched her mother's health decline for years. Loss and hardship entered her life early, and those emotions would later find their way into her writing. Rowling wanted to become a writer, but like many young people, she worried about practicality. She studied French and classics at the University of Exeter. After graduation, she worked various jobs, including as a bilingual secretary and researcher. But something was missing. She felt stuck. And then came the moment that changed everything. In 1990, while traveling on a delayed train from Manchester to London, inspiration struck. A boy wizard appeared in her mind. A skinny boy who didn't know he was famous. A lonely child discovering he belonged to a magical world. Harry Potter. The idea came fully formed. Hogwarts, magic, friendships, dangers. But she had no pen with her. For 4 hours, she sat imagining the world in her head, unable to write anything down. Later, she rushed home and began writing immediately. She had found her story. But life soon delivered heavy blows. Shortly after conceiving the Harry Potter story, Rowling's mother died after a long battle with illness. Rowling was devastated. Grief shaped her deeply, and her pain found expression in Harry Potter, whose parents died before the story begins. Loss became part of the emotional heart of the series. Seeking a fresh start, Rowling moved to Portugal to teach English. There, she continued writing Harry Potter in her spare time. But her life took another turn. In Portugal, Rowling married journalist Jorge Arentz. In 1993, they had a daughter, Jessica, but the marriage soon became troubled. Arguments escalated, and Rowling later described the relationship as deeply unhappy. Eventually, the marriage collapsed. With her infant daughter, little money, and emotional exhaustion, Rowling left Portugal and returned to the United Kingdom. She settled in Edinburgh near her sister. At this point, her life seemed to be falling apart. She was unemployed, recently divorced, living as a single mother, dependent on government welfare support, and struggling with depression. Rowling has openly spoken about battling severe depression. During this time, she felt like a failure. Her marriage had ended. Her career hadn't begun. She worried constantly about providing for her child. She once described herself as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. Dark thoughts haunted her. From this emotional darkness came one of Harry Potter's most terrifying creatures, the Dementors, beings that drain happiness and hope. Writing became her survival. She later said, "Writing saved me." Life as a single mother with a small baby made writing at home difficult. So Rowling began writing in cafes while her daughter slept in a stroller. Contrary to myth, she didn't write in cafes only because she was poor. She went because it helped her escape isolation and focus. She wrote whenever she could, during naps, evenings, quiet moments. Piece by piece, the manuscript grew. She finished the first Harry Potter novel in 1995, but finishing the book was only the beginning. Rowling began sending her manuscript to publishers. The responses were discouraging. Rejection letters piled up. 12 publishers rejected her book. Some never replied. Others said children wouldn't read something so long. Many believed fantasy books wouldn't sell well, but Rowling refused to give up. Finally, in 1996, a small publishing house called Bloomsbury agreed to publish the book. Legend says the publisher's young daughter read the first chapter and begged for more. That helped convince them. Rowling received a modest advance, about £1,500. Not life-changing money, but it was a start. In 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was published in the UK. The first print run was tiny, only about 500 hardcover copies. Rowling was advised to get a day job because children's books rarely made money. But word spread. Children loved the story. Teachers recommended it. Bookstores saw demand growing. Soon, American publishers competed for rights, and Scholastic bought them for a large sum. Rowling's life began to change. The Harry Potter series grew into a global phenomenon. Each new book release attracted huge crowds. Children lined up at midnight for new installments. The books were translated into dozens of languages. Then came the movies. Actors like Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint brought the characters to life on screen. The Wizarding World became one of the biggest entertainment franchises in history. And a single mother who once worried about heating bills became one of the world's wealthiest authors. Fame was overwhelming. Rowling suddenly lived under public attention. Reporters followed her life. Criticism and praise came equally. But Rowling never forgot her past. She spoke openly about struggle, mental health, and perseverance. She used her success to support charities, particularly those helping children and fighting poverty. She even founded organizations supporting vulnerable families. Her success didn't erase her empathy. It deepened it. Rowling's story is not just about wealth or fame. It is about resilience. She once said, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." Her journey teaches powerful lessons. Failure is not the end. Rejection does not define you. Hardship can produce creativity. Persistence beats talent when talent gives up. Success often grows quietly in hidden seasons. After finishing the Harry Potter series, Rowling explored new writing paths. She wrote novels for adults under her own name and detective stories under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith. She continued expanding the Wizarding world through plays and films. But regardless of future projects, Harry Potter remains her legacy, a story born from struggle that gave hope to millions. Rowling's greatest success may not be wealth or fame. It may be that she kept writing when life told her to stop, when depression whispered defeat, when publishers said no, when circumstances looked hopeless. She kept going. And because she did, the world gained a story that encouraged millions of children to read. Somewhere today, another struggling parent is working on a dream. Someone facing rejection wonders if it's worth continuing. Someone at rock bottom is trying to rise again. J.K. Rowling's journey reminds us, your current chapter is not your final one. The world may not see your magic yet, but if you keep writing your story, page by page, your moment can come, just like hers did, from welfare to wizarding worlds, from struggle to success. This is the power of persistence, imagination, and hope. And every great story begins with someone who refuses to give up. And so, the story of J.K. Rowling reminds us that success is not born in comfort, but often in struggle. A single mother with no certainty about tomorrow dared to believe in a story no one else could yet see. Through rejection, hardship, and doubt, she kept writing. And in doing so, changed her life and inspired millions around the world. If you're facing your own difficult chapter today, remember, even the darkest times can give birth to extraordinary futures. Your circumstances do not define your ending. Keep going, keep believing, keep creating, because the story of your success may already be quietly unfolding. And like every great story, yours is just getting started. If J.K. Rowling's journey inspired you, let her story remind you that your dream is still possible. No matter where you're starting from, don't let failure or hardship stop you. Use it as fuel to keep moving forward. And if this story encouraged you today, like this video, share it with someone who needs motivation, and subscribe for more true stories of struggle and success. Tell us in the comments, what dream are you refusing to give up on? Because your breakthrough story could be next. in the tough neighborhoods of Queens, New York, where opportunities were scarce and survival required grit. A young boy grew up with two heavy burdens on his shoulders: poverty and dyslexia. Teachers didn't expect much from him. The streets offered distractions, and the future looked uncertain. But that boy would grow up to build one of the most iconic fashion brands in history, a brand that would generate billions in revenue and reshape urban fashion worldwide. His name is Daymond John, founder of FUBU, for us by us, and his story proves that hardship is not a life sentence. Sometimes, it's the very few needed to rise. This is not just a business story. It's a story of resilience, creativity, sacrifice, and belief during the hardest times. Daymond Garfield John was born on February 23rd, 1969, in Brooklyn, New York, but he grew up in Hollis, Queens, an area known for its working-class families and street struggles. When Daymond was about 10 years old, his parents divorced. His mother, Margot John, suddenly had to raise him largely on her own. Money was tight, very tight. They lived in a small house, and his mother worked hard to make ends meet. Daymond learned early that nothing came easy, but his mother did something powerful. Instead of hiding financial struggles, she involved him. She taught him independence. She made him understand the value of work. She believed responsibility builds strength. At age 10, Daymond entered a program that allowed students to work and attend school on alternating weeks. 1 week in class, 1 week working. So while other kids played, Daymond learned how to earn. He delivered newspapers. He worked at restaurants. He handed out flyers. He took whatever job he could find. He wasn't chasing luxury. He was chasing survival. School was another battlefield. Daymond struggled academically, especially with reading and writing. Years later, he would discover he had dyslexia, a learning difference affecting reading and language processing. Back then, few people understood dyslexia. Students were often labeled slow or lazy. Teachers underestimated him. But dyslexia gave him something unexpected. It forced him to develop other strengths. He became observant, creative, street smart, resourceful. He learned to think visually, spot patterns, and find unconventional solutions. Instead of becoming discouraged, Daymond learned survival skills that traditional schooling never taught. In the 1980s, Queens was alive with the rising culture of hip-hop. Music, street fashion, and identity were exploding. Artists expressed themselves through style, oversized shirts, bold logos, unique looks. But something bothered Daymond. Big clothing brands were making money off hip-hop culture. Yet the community creating the culture didn't own those brands. He noticed people wanted clothing that represented them. So he asked a simple question: why don't we create our own? That question changed his life. With no money to start a business, Daymond did the only thing he could. He improvised. He noticed wool ski hats selling for high prices in stores. So he bought cheap fabric, went home, and asked his mother to teach him how to sew. Soon, he started making hats himself. He and his friends sold them on street corners in Queens. They made about $800 in one day, an enormous amount for them at the time. That moment proved something powerful. People wanted what he created. He wasn't just hustling, he was building demand. In the early 1990s, Daymond officially launched his clothing line. He named it FUBU, for us by us. The name spoke directly to urban communities who felt ignored by mainstream fashion brands. But success didn't come instantly. Daymond turned his mother's house into a small factory. The living room became a sewing area. Fabric covered the house. Machines ran all night. His mother made a huge sacrifice. She mortgaged her home for $100,000 to support his dream. Imagine the pressure. If FUBU failed, they could lose everything. Daymond and his friends worked nonstop, sewing clothes themselves and selling them wherever they could. Sleep became optional. Hustle became survival. The turning point came through hip-hop star LL Cool J, who also grew up in Queens. LL Cool J wore a FUBU hat in a major Gap commercial, cleverly promoting FUBU while appearing in a mainstream ad. Soon after, LL Cool J openly wore FUBU clothing in music videos and appearances. Suddenly, everyone wanted FUBU. Orders exploded. Demand skyrocketed. But success brought new challenges. With growing demand came bigger risks. Retailers placed huge orders. But Damon didn't have enough money to manufacture at scale. Banks rejected him repeatedly. They didn't believe in urban fashion brands run by young entrepreneurs from Queens. At one point, Fubu almost collapsed. Bills piled up, pressure mounted, but Damon refused to quit. He negotiated with manufacturers, convinced partners to take risks, and kept pushing forward. Finally, Samsung's textile division partnered with Fubu, providing manufacturing support. That partnership saved the company. By the late 1990s, Fubu became a global brand. It earned over $350 million in annual sales at its peak. Eventually, Fubu generated over $6 billion in worldwide sales across clothing, footwear, and accessories. Damon John, the kid from Queens who struggled in school, became a fashion mogul. Later, he became an investor on the hit show Shark Tank, helping other entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. Damon's journey teaches powerful lessons. 1. Poverty can teach resourcefulness. When you lack resources, you learn creativity. 2. Dyslexia didn't stop him. He learned differently, but he learned powerfully. 3. Hustle beats excuses. He worked while others slept. 4. Support matters. His mother's belief fueled his success. 5. Ownership changes everything. He built something for his community, not just profit. Damon John often says, "Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start where you are with what you have." He didn't have money. He didn't have connections. He didn't have perfect grades, but he had determination. And that was enough. If you're struggling right now, if money is tight, if people doubt you, if doors keep closing, remember Damon John, a kid with dyslexia, raised by a single mother, living in poverty, who built a global empire from his living room. Your struggle might be shaping your future strength. Your hardship might be your preparation. Success is not reserved for the privileged. Sometimes it belongs to those who refuse to quit. So here's the question. What are you going to build with the challenges in your life? Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for permission. Start with what you have, where you are right now. Turn your struggle into strength. Turn your idea into action. Turn your dream into reality. And if this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs motivation today, because the next great success story could be yours. Småland, southern Sweden, a region shaped not by abundance, but by scarcity. Farmers here worked soil filled with rocks. Winters were long. Life demanded discipline, humility, and resourcefulness. Families learned to repair instead of replace, to save instead of waste. And in this environment, one boy would learn lessons that would change how the world furnishes its homes. A farmhouse stands quietly among the fields. Inside, a young boy sorts small boxes. His name is Ingvar Kamprad. Little Ingvar rides his bicycle down a dirt road with boxes tied behind him. He knocks on a neighbor's door. Ingvar Fifer Kamprad was born on March 30th, 1926, on the Elmdred farm near the village of Gunnereid. His parents, Fifer and Berta Kamprad, were hard-working farmers trying to survive difficult economic times. From an early age, Ingvar showed unusual curiosity about trade. At just 5 years old, he discovered that matches could be bought cheaply in bulk in Stockholm. He then sold them individually in his village for a profit. The child smiles as a neighbor buys a box. Soon, his bicycle carried more goods: seeds, Christmas decorations, greeting cards, pens and pencils. He carefully kept notes of customers and profits. While other children played, Ingvar calculated margins. He discovered something powerful. If you sell at a lower price than everyone else, people will buy more. A principle he would never forget. Young Ingvar sits in a classroom struggling with reading assignments. School was not easy for Ingvar. He suffered from dyslexia, making reading and writing difficult. But his weakness in academics sharpened his strength in practical thinking. He remembered numbers, customers, and business ideas easily. His father rewarded good grades with money. Ingvar used the money not for toys, but to expand his little trading operations. By his teenage years, business was already part of his identity. Europe is burning in World War II, but in rural Sweden, a young man registers a company. In 1943, at just 17 years old, Ingvar officially started his own company. He named it using his initials and hometown. IKEA. I Ingvar. K Kamprad. E Elmtrid. A Gunnerid. At first, IKEA sold small items through mail orders. Pens, wallets, watches, frames. Customers ordered goods from catalogs and received them by delivery trucks. But Ingvar wanted something bigger. He was still searching for the right product. After World War II, Sweden experiences housing growth. Young couples need furniture, but cannot afford expensive pieces. Sweden faced rapid housing expansion. Families needed furniture quickly and cheaply. In 1948, IKEA began selling furniture made by local manufacturers. The response was immediate. Affordable furniture attracted huge demand, but success created enemies. Traditional furniture retailers saw IKEA as a threat. They pressured suppliers to stop selling to Kamprad. Suddenly, IKEA faced supply shortages. For many young businesses, this would have been the end, but not for Ingvar Kamprad. Ingvar meets directly with small furniture producers. Instead of surrendering, Kamprad found independent manufacturers willing to work with him. He shifted production partnerships and kept prices low. Then he made another important discovery. Customers hesitated to buy furniture they could not see. So, Ingvar created a solution. Customers walk through simple display rooms in Almhult. They sit on sofas, open cabinets. In 1953, IKEA opened a showroom where customers could see furniture before ordering. This was revolutionary for mail-order furniture. Visitors could test products before buying. Sales increased dramatically. IKEA was no longer just a catalog company. It was becoming an experience. A designer struggles to load a table into his car. He removes the legs. Ingvar watches. An idea forms. Transporting assembled furniture was expensive and inefficient. Then designer Gillis Lundgren removed table legs to fit it into a car. Kamprad instantly recognized the opportunity. Ship furniture flat. Let customers assemble it themselves. Lower transport costs meant lower prices. Customers became part of the process. The flat pack concept was born, and global furniture retail would never be the same again. Huge crowds arrive at Almhult. Customers line up outside. In 1958, IKEA opened its first full-scale store. It became the largest furniture showroom in Scandinavia. People traveled long distances to visit. Ingvar also introduced something unusual, a restaurant inside the store. He noticed customers left stores when hungry. If customers stayed longer, they bought more. Simple thinking, powerful results. Despite growing success, Ingvar remains modest. He flies economy class. He drives old cars. He eats with employees. As IKEA expanded, Kamprad became wealthy, but he remained deeply frugal. He reused items, stayed in modest hotels, encouraged employees to save resources. His belief was clear. Waste anywhere increases prices everywhere. And IKEA existed to lower prices, not raise them. During the 1960s and 70s, IKEA expanded beyond Sweden. Stores opened in Norway, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, and soon across Europe. Each store followed Kamprad's philosophy. Good design should be affordable for ordinary people. Yet Kamprad's life also carried controversy. In his youth during the 1940s, he had connections with Swedish pro-fascist movements. When these associations became public decades later, Kamprad publicly admitted his involvement. He described it as the greatest mistake of his life and apologized repeatedly. It remained a difficult part of his legacy. By the 1980s, IKEA was becoming a global force. The concept worked everywhere. Affordable design, self-service, flat-pack furniture. Stores became destinations. Weekends meant IKEA trips. Entire homes could now be furnished affordably, and the company kept growing. In 1986, Kamprad stepped down from day-to-day operations, but he never truly left. He visited stores secretly, observed customers, looked for improvements. The founder never stopped learning. After decades abroad, Kamprad returned to Sweden in his later years. Back to Småland, back to simplicity. On January 27, 2018, Ingvar Kamprad died peacefully at age 91. From selling matches on a bicycle to building the world's largest furniture retailer, Ingvar Kamprad believed business should improve everyday life, not just create profit. And from the rocky soil of Smaland, he changed how the world lives. By the late 1970s, IKEA had already transformed furniture shopping in Scandinavia. But Ingvar Kamprad was not thinking regionally. He was thinking globally. Expansion began accelerating across Europe and beyond. Germany became one of IKEA's biggest markets. Stores opened in Austria, the Netherlands, and later in North America. But exporting Swedish furniture culture was not simple. Each country had different tastes, apartment sizes, lifestyles, and expectations. IKEA had to adapt without losing its identity. Kamprad pushes teams to learn from local customers, while keeping prices low and design functional. It was a balancing act between global brand and local needs. Entering the United States in the mid-1980s proved difficult. American homes were larger, beds were bigger, kitchens followed different measurements. IKEA's European-sized furniture often didn't fit American expectations. Early stores struggled. Instead of retreating, IKEA studied customer behavior. They redesigned products for the American market, adjusted sizes, and improved logistics. Kamprad believed mistakes were lessons, not failures. Slowly, American customers embraced IKEA's style. Modern, affordable, practical. The company learned an important truth. Global success requires listening, not just selling. Inside IKEA, Kamprad built a company culture unlike traditional corporations. Hierarchy was discouraged. Managers flew economy class. Executives stayed in budget hotels. Office spaces were simple and practical. Kamprad believed leadership should stay close to reality. He often reminded employees, "Only while sleeping one makes no mistakes." Making mistakes is the privilege of the active. Employees were encouraged to find better, cheaper solutions continuously. The mission was clear: create a better everyday life for many people, not just profits for shareholders. Despite enormous wealth, Kamprad lived modestly. Stories about his frugality became legendary. He drove old vehicles for years. He preferred simple meals. He sometimes bought clothes from flea markets. Employees often discovered him quietly flying economy class beside them. Critics sometimes called it excessive thrift. Supporters called it consistency. For Kamprad, simplicity kept him connected to customers. If he lived lavishly, how could he understand people trying to save money? As IKEA grew, Kamprad worried about the company's future after his death. He wanted IKEA protected from hostile takeovers and market pressures. So he created a complicated ownership structure involving foundations and holding companies. Many operations were placed under foundations in the Netherlands and Liechtenstein. The goal was long-term independence. Critics questioned transparency. Supporters saw strategic genius. But one thing was certain: Kamprad did not want IKEA to lose its original mission. In the 1990s, details of Kamprad's involvement with pro-fascist groups in his youth resurfaced publicly. He did not deny it. Instead, he wrote letters to employees and publicly apologized. He called his involvement foolish and deeply regrettable. Friends described his remorse as sincere, but the controversy remained part of his public story. A reminder that even visionary leaders carry human flaws. By the 1990s and 2000s, IKEA was no longer just a furniture store. It became part of lifestyle culture. Customers came not only to shop, but to spend time. Restaurants served Swedish meatballs. Children played in supervised areas. Entire apartments were displayed inside showrooms. People walked through imagined homes, gathering ideas for their own lives. IKEA became inspiration, not just retail. As environmental concerns grew worldwide, IKEA faced new responsibilities. The company began investing in renewable energy, sustainable materials, and recycling initiatives. Wood sourcing, labor practices, and environmental impact became central challenges. Kamprad pushed IKEA to think long-term. Profit meant little if resources disappeared. The company began transforming operations to reduce waste and environmental harm. Kamprad's three sons eventually took roles within the IKEA ecosystem. Succession planning was complex due to IKEA's unique structure. Kamprad did not want family control to weaken professional management. Leadership had to remain merit-based. The company must outlive its founder. After decades living in Switzerland, Kamprad returned to Sweden in his final years. Back to Smaland, back to the landscapes that shaped his thinking. He remained curious, reading company reports and offering ideas even in old age. Business was not just work. It was part of who he was. On January 27, 2018, Ingvar Kamprad passed away peacefully at age 91. Tributes came from around the world. Employees remembered a demanding but inspiring leader. Customers remembered affordable furniture that helped build their homes. Entrepreneurs remembered a visionary thinker. From matches sold on a bicycle to hundreds of stores worldwide, Ingvar Kamprad reshaped how people live. His idea was simple. Design and comfort should not belong only to the wealthy. They should belong to everyone. And in millions of homes today, pieces of that idea still stand, assembled with an Allen key. Kamprad once said, "The most dangerous poison is the feeling of achievement. The antidote is to every evening think what can be done better tomorrow." A lesson not only for business, but for life. To understand IKEA, one must understand Ingvar Kamprad's mind. Not the billionaire, not the global icon, but the boy from Smaland who learned early that scarcity sharpens intelligence. Kamprad believed ideas matter more than titles, and discipline mattered more than talent. His thinking was not abstract. It was relentlessly practical. In Smaland, nothing was wasted. Broken tools were fixed. Old furniture was repurposed. That mindset followed Kamprad into business. Where others saw cost-cutting, he saw respect for resources. Where others saw limitation, he saw opportunity. IKEA was not built on luxury. It was built on intelligent restraint. Kamprad wrote a document called The Testament of a Furniture Dealer. It was not a legal text. It was a moral compass. Inside, Kamprad warned against bureaucracy, arrogance, and waste. He reminded employees that simplicity and humility were strengths. And he emphasized one idea above all. Low prices are a responsibility, not a marketing trick. As IKEA grew, Kamprad feared the enemy that destroys many large companies. Bureaucracy. He believed complexity killed creativity. Rules multiplied costs. Titles created distance. So he pushed for flat structures, fast decisions, personal responsibility. Even as IKEA became enormous, Kamprad fought to keep it human. IKEA design was never about status. It was about reality. Designers were asked, can this be packed flat? Can it be produced cheaply? Can it survive years of daily use? Can it fit small apartments? Beauty mattered, but function mattered more. Kamprad believed good design should serve life, not impress it. Kamprad was admired, but he was also demanding. Employees described him as relentless. Mistakes were tolerated. Complacency was not. He expected teams to constantly improve. Some found it inspiring. Others found it exhausting. But Kamprad believed comfort was dangerous. Success, he warned, makes people lazy. Behind the discipline was a complex man. Kamprad struggled with self-doubt. He was deeply affected by criticism. The resurfacing of his political past haunted him. Though he apologized sincerely, he carried shame for decades. Friends said he never fully forgave himself. Success did not erase regret. Kamprad also battled periods of alcohol dependence earlier in life. Later, he spoke openly about his struggles and efforts to regain control. He believed discipline was not natural. It was practice. Self-control, like business, required constant effort. Over the years, IKEA faced serious challenges. Product safety issues, supply chain scandals, environmental criticism, child labor concerns among suppliers. Each crisis tested the company's values. Kamprad insisted problems be faced directly. Silence, he believed, destroyed trust. Mistakes must be admitted, corrected, learned from. As the world changed, IKEA had to change too. Urbanization meant smaller living spaces. E-commerce challenged physical stores. Younger generations wanted sustainability, not just affordability. IKEA responded with smaller city stores, online platforms, circular furniture concepts. Renewable energy investments. The principles stayed. The methods evolved. Letting go was not easy for Kamprad. IKEA was his life's work. But he knew founders must eventually step aside. Control must give way to trust. The greatest success, he believed, was building something that thrives without you. After Kamprad's death, IKEA continued, not as a monument, but as a living system. The company still wrestles with the same questions. How low can prices go without sacrificing ethics? How global can we be without losing humanity? How fast can we grow without losing purpose? These questions are Kamprad's true inheritance. Perhaps Kamprad's greatest achievement was not wealth, it was participation. Millions of people became co-creators. They assembled desks, built beds, turned boxes into homes. IKEA furniture didn't arrive finished. Neither does life. Ingvar Kamprad never tried to be extraordinary. He tried to be useful, and in doing so, he changed the ordinary world. Most things still remain to be done. A glorious future. Ingvar Kamprad. IKEA's promise was simple: low prices. But achieving low prices in a global economy was never simple. As production spread across continents, new challenges appeared. Factories in developing countries could produce goods cheaply, but labor standards varied. During the 1990s and early 2000s, investigations revealed cases where suppliers used child labor or unsafe working conditions. Critics questioned whether affordable furniture came at too high a cost. IKEA responded by strengthening supplier codes of conduct and monitoring systems. Factories were audited. Partnerships were ended where violations continued. Programs supporting education and child welfare were introduced in affected regions. For Kamprad, the lesson was clear. Low prices should never come from human suffering. Business responsibility extended beyond profits. Furniture depends heavily on wood, and wood depends on forests. As environmental awareness grew, IKEA faced pressure to protect natural resources. The company invested in sustainable forestry, renewable energy, and recyclable materials. Stores installed solar panels. Packaging was redesigned to reduce waste. The goal was ambitious: to become climate positive in the long term, a future where the company gives back more than it takes. Cities around the world were growing rapidly. Living spaces became smaller. Young professionals delayed home ownership. Families adapted to compact homes. IKEA responded with furniture designed for tight spaces, beds with storage underneath, foldable tables, multi-purpose furniture. The company once again adapted to reality, not fantasy. Psychologists later identified something called the IKEA effect. People value things more when they help build them. By assembling furniture themselves, customers formed emotional connections with their purchases. The process became part of the ownership experience. Frustrating at times, but deeply personal. Kamprad accidentally discovered something profound. Effort creates attachment. Kamprad inspired admiration and criticism alike. Supporters praised his vision, his democratization of design, his disciplined simplicity. Critics questioned corporate structures, tax strategies, and aggressive cost control. But even critics admitted one thing: few entrepreneurs shaped modern living as much as he did. In his final years, Kamprad lived quietly. He enjoyed ordinary routines, simple meals, conversations with friends. He watched the world move forward. Knowing IKEA would continue without him, he never behaved like a billionaire. Perhaps because, in his mind, he never stopped being a farmer's son. Kamprad's life offers lessons beyond furniture. Start small, solve real problems, keep costs low, stay curious, admit mistakes, and never believe success is permanent. He believed tomorrow always demands improvement. Today, millions of homes across continents share a quiet connection: a bookshelf, a table, a wardrobe, objects built from flat boxes, but also built from an idea. That good living should be accessible to many, not a privilege for few. The world now moves into digital commerce, automation, and sustainability challenges. IKEA experiments with furniture rental models, circular reuse programs, smart home technology, urban delivery solutions. The future of living spaces continues to change, but the founding mission remains: From these fields came a boy who learned to sell matches. From those matches came a company. From that company came a revolution in everyday living. Ingvar Kamprad did not invent furniture. He reinvented how it reached people. And in doing so, he changed homes across the world. Only those who are asleep make no mistakes. Ingvar Kamprad. A home is more than walls and furniture. It is where stories begin, where dreams are built, where ordinary moments become memories. From a small farm in Sweden, a young boy learned how to make the most of very little. And in doing so, he helped millions of people create spaces they could call home. Ingvar Kamprad proved that innovation does not always start in great cities or wealthy industries. Sometimes it begins with a simple idea. Make life better for many people. The screen slowly fades images of IKEA stores closing for the night. Lights go off one by one. The boxes may be flat. The instructions may be simple. But the impact is global. And somewhere tonight, another home is being built, another life beginning, another story unfolding. Ingvar Kamprad, 1926 to 2018, founder of IKEA. And as Kamprad himself believed, there is always something that can be done better tomorrow. Sarah Blakely's story reminds us of something simple and dangerous. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the path to it. Sometimes a dream you lose is clearing space for the idea that will change your life. And sometimes all it takes is the courage to cut off what doesn't fit anymore. Sarah Blakely was born in 1971 in Clearwater, Florida. Her father was a trial attorney, a man who lived by the sword of logic and persuasion. Her mother was an artist, someone who saw the world in shapes and possibilities. This combination of legal grit and creative vision would later become the DNA of Spanx. But in the 1970s, it manifested in a very unusual dinner table ritual. While other parents were asking, "Did you win the game?" or "Did you get an A?" John Blakely would look at Sarah and her brother and ask, "What did you fail at today?" Most children grow up viewing failure as a bruise to the ego or a source of shame. Sarah was no different. She initially felt the sting of not making the cheerleading squad or failing a test. Her father's reaction was the secret sauce. If she had a story of failure, he would high-five her. If she didn't have one, he was disappointed. Through this, Sarah learned a radical truth. Failure isn't the outcome. Failure is the act of not trying. By the time she was a teenager, she had been immunized against the fear of looking stupid. This psychological armor would be the only thing that kept her going when the rest of the world called her crazy. Sarah's early identity was tied to becoming a trial lawyer. She idolized the way her father could command a room and use words to change a narrative. She spent her college years at Florida State University preparing for this path. In 1993, she sat for the LSAT. She failed. Thinking it was a fluke, she spent months in prep courses, highlighting textbooks until they were neon yellow. She took the test again. She failed even worse the second time. For the first time in her adult life, the failure table philosophy was put to the ultimate test. Her dream was dead. She couldn't get into law school. In the eyes of her peers, she was a high-achieving student who had suddenly hit a brick wall. Instead of spiraling into a what now? Depression, Sarah leaned into the absurdity of the situation. She moved back home and took a job at Disney World, the goofy interval. For a period, the future youngest self-made billionaire in the world was wearing a goofy costume, waving at tourists in the Florida heat. It was a lesson in humility. She learned that your title doesn't define your value. The pivot. After 3 months of Disney, she realized she couldn't be a mascot forever. She saw a job posting for Donka, a company that sold fax machines door to door. Part 3. The Fax Machine Trenches, 1993 to 1998. The Cold Call University. If the LSAT was her first major failure, Donka was her PhD in rejection. For 7 years, Sarah's life was defined by the Florida humidity and the sound of doors slamming. Imagine being a young woman in the mid-90s, lugging a heavy fax machine through parking lots. She was frequently escorted out of buildings by security, yelled at by stressed office managers, ignored for hours in waiting rooms, seeing her business cards thrown in the trash before she even left the building. The overcoming Sarah turned it into a game. She realized that if she could make a prospect laugh in the first 15 seconds, they wouldn't kick her out. She began to study the art of the hook. After she realized that no was rarely personal. She learned to visualize the sale before she walked in. She spent her drives listening to motivational tapes like Wayne Dyer, rewiring her subconscious to stay positive despite the constant no. By the end of her 7-year stint, she wasn't just a salesperson. She was one of the top producers in the company. But she was also tired. She was selling someone else's dream. The legend of Spanx begins with a pair of cream-colored pants. Sarah was getting ready for a party and realized she didn't have the right undergarments to make her silhouette look smooth under the thin fabric. Traditional pantyhose had those thick, ugly seams at the toes, and control top always felt like a torture device. Sarah took a pair of scissors and cut the feet off her pantyhose. She wore the footless hose under her pants. She looked great. She felt confident. As she danced that night, the leggings kept rolling up her calves. She realized she had a billion-dollar idea, but she had zero idea how to manufacture it. She didn't wait for a partner. She didn't look for an investor. She took her $5,000 in life savings and decided to build it herself. She spent her nights at the Georgia Tech Library researching hosiery patents. She didn't have a background in fashion. She had a background in not being afraid to fail. How she cold called hosiery mills while still working her day job at Donka. The patent battle. Why she wrote her own patent to save $3,000. The naming of Spanx. Why the K-sound was a strategic choice. The period where Sarah was living a double life. A fax machine salesperson by day and a hosiery disruptor by night. With her $5,000 savings tucked away, Sarah knew she needed a manufacturer. She looked at the labels of her own hosiery and saw that most were made in North Carolina. Without an appointment, an agent, or a prototype, she spent her 1 week of vacation time driving from Florida to the hosiery capital of the world. The textile industry in the late 90s was a good old boys club. It was dominated by men who had been running mills for generations. Sarah would sit in lobbies, waiting for owners to see her. When they did, they were baffled. A young woman with no fashion degree, trying to explain why she wanted to cut the feet off pantyhose. The rejection. Every single mill owner turned her down. One literally asked her, "And who is backing you, honey?" When she said, "Me," they laughed. They didn't see a market for footless hose because they had never experienced the problem she was solving. 2 weeks after returning to Florida, defeated, she received a phone call. It was a mill owner in Asheboro, North Carolina. He told her, "I've decided to help you." Asterisk the reason. He had gone home and mentioned the crazy idea to his 2 daughters. They immediately screamed, "Dad, that's genius. We'd buy that." Asterisk the lesson. Sarah realized that the decision makers didn't represent the consumers. She learned to bypass the experts and speak directly to the people who shared her pain points. Once the mill was on board, Sarah faced a new wall: intellectual property. She knew she had to protect her idea, but every patent attorney she spoke to quoted her between $3,000 and $5,000. If she paid the lawyer, she would have $0 left for production. She was at a crossroads. Give up the legal protection or give up the product. Sarah went to a Barnes & Noble and bought a book titled Patents and Trademarks for Dummies, or a similar DIY legal guide. She spent weeks at the Georgia Tech Library. She hand-wrote the patent application, describing the technical nit and the waistband innovation. The genius move. She didn't just patent product. She patented the solution, the final polish. She eventually found a lawyer who agreed to help her with the claims section, the most technical part, for $700, but only after she had done 90% of the work herself. He later confessed he only took the job because he thought her idea was so hilarious he wanted to see what happened next. Sarah spent a year trying to name her creation. She wanted something that felt like a household name, but had the punch of a comedian's joke. Her initial ideas were safe and boring. Open-toed hosiery, or Delilah's. They lacked stickiness. She remembered a tip from the world of branding. The most memorable brands often have a hard K-Sound, Kodak, Coca-Cola, Kleenex. While sitting in Atlanta traffic, the word Spanx popped into her head. She changed the KS to an X after her research showed that made-up words were easier to trademark and looked more high fashion on a package. The wit. She knew the name was provocative. It made people giggle or blush. That reaction was better than a yawn. It was free marketing. The packaging. While every other hosiery brand used beige packaging with soft focus photos of legs, Sarah chose vibrant red, yellow, and blue with illustrations of 3 different women. She wanted to look like a comic book, approachable, fun, and bold. In 2000, Sarah managed to get a 10-minute meeting with a buyer for Neiman Marcus in Dallas. This was the make or break moment, the struggle. Midway through the meeting, she could see the buyer's eyes glazing over. The buyer was looking at the product in the box, not seeing the magic. Sarah knew she was failing. She was about to be another no. Sarah interrupted the pitch. She said, "I know this sounds strange, but will you come to the bathroom with me?" Asterisk the demonstration. Inside the bathroom stall, Sarah put the Spanx on under her cream-colored pants. She showed the buyer the before. The buyer looked at her and said, "I get it. It's brilliant." Neiman Marcus placed an order for 7 stores. By late 2000, Spanx was in a handful of high-end department stores, but Sarah was still the company's only employee. She was still answering the phones with a fake British assistant voice to make the company seem larger. Then came the phone call that would break her website and change her life. Sarah knew that traditional advertising, TV spots, billboards, glossy magazine spreads, was financially impossible. She had to rely on earned media. She decided to target the most influential woman in the world, Oprah Winfrey, the overcoming. Instead of a formal pitch to a corporate office, Sarah sent a gift basket of her footless hosiery to Oprah's stylist. She included a handwritten note explaining why she created it. In November 2000, Oprah appeared on her Favorite Things episode. She told the world, "I've stopped wearing panties, and I only wear Spanx." The aftermath. Sarah's website, which she had built herself, crashed within minutes. She was still living in her apartment, and suddenly she had orders for thousands of units. She had to recruit her friends and family to help pack boxes in her living room, while her competitors were spending millions on celebrity endorsements and Madison Avenue ad agencies. Sarah spent $0. Growth often requires massive capital. Most entrepreneurs at this stage would have sold 40% of their company to venture capitalists just to keep up with the demand. Sarah refused. She wanted to keep 100% ownership. She turned herself into the chief marketing officer of reality. Sarah would go into department stores and move her product from the back of the hosiery department to the front of the cash register when the clerks weren't looking. She appeared on QVC and told her story. She didn't act like a corporate CEO. She talked about her own muffin top and her own struggles with white pants. Women didn't feel like they were being sold a product. They felt like they were getting a secret from a friend. The no-man boardroom. As Spanx grew, Sarah faced the struggle of management. She had never managed a team. She hired a CEO, Lori and Goldman, to handle the operational heavy lifting, while Sarah remained a creative visionary. This allowed the company to scale from a $1 million business to a $100 million business without Sarah burning out on logistics. In 2012, Forbes magazine named Sarah Blakely the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. She was 41. The billionaire label brought a new kind of pressure. For years, she had been the underdog. Now, she was an establishment. People began to wonder if Spanx had peaked. Sarah doubled down on her failure philosophy. She began speaking publicly about the failure table and the LSATs. She used her wealth not just for lifestyle, but for a mission. She was the first self-made female billionaire to sign the Giving Pledge, promising to donate at least half of her wealth to charity. The Sarah Blakely Foundation. She focused on the Belly Art Project and other initiatives to empower women and girls through education and entrepreneurship. After 21 years of owning 100% of the company, Sarah finally decided to bring on a partner. In 2021, she sold a majority stake to Blackstone in a deal that valued Spanx at $1.2 billion. Many founders feel a sense of loss when they sell their baby. There is a struggle to ensure the culture survives the transition to a private equity giant. Sarah orchestrated a deal that was uniquely Sarah. The board was mandated to be all-female. The employee gift, to celebrate, she gave all 500-plus employees 2 first-class plane tickets to anywhere in the world and $10,000 in cash. It was her way of saying that the $1.2 billion wasn't hers. It was theirs. The final tally, how she overcame the impossible. Sarah Blakely's story ends not with a bank balance, but with a philosophy. She proved that you don't need an MBA, an inheritance, or a permission slip from the experts to change the world. You only need the willingness to look a little foolish and the resilience to survive a no. Sarah Blakely didn't become extraordinary by avoiding failure. She became extraordinary by befriending it. She failed twice at the LSAT. She sold fax machines when her peers moved ahead. She cut the feet off pantyhose because nothing else worked. And in doing so, she built a legacy that whispered to millions of women, you don't need permission to begin. You don't need perfection to succeed. And failure doesn't disqualify you. It prepares you. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt delayed, rejected, or underestimated, backhand index pointing right, like this video. Backhand index pointing right, share it with someone who needs hope. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe for more stories of resilience. Backhand index pointing right, comment below. What failure shaped you the most? Your story isn't over yet. Howard Schultz. From the projects to the power of a cup of coffee. Howard Schultz was not born into comfort. He was not born into opportunity. And he was certainly not born into wealth. Long before the world knew his name. Long before Starbucks became a symbol recognized in every corner of the globe. Howard Schultz was just a boy growing up in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, New York, surrounded by struggle, uncertainty, and quiet desperation. This is not a story about coffee. This is a story about dignity, about belief, about a man who grew up watching his father lose everything, and decided that someday, somehow, he would build a company that treated people differently. Howard Schultz was born in 1953 in Brooklyn's Canarsie housing projects. His world was small. The hallways were narrow. The ceilings were low. And hope often felt even lower. His father, Fred Schultz, was a blue-collar worker, a delivery truck driver, a factory worker, a man who took whatever job he could find just to keep food on the table. There was no safety net, no insurance, no backup plan. One winter day, Howard's father slipped on ice while working. He injured his ankle badly. That single moment changed everything. There was no health insurance, no workers' compensation, no paid leave. Fred Schultz lost his job, and with it, the family lost ability. Howard watched his father sit at home, injured and ashamed, not because he was lazy, but because the system had no place for a man who was hurt. That image burned itself into Howard's memory. I saw what happens when someone is treated as disposable, Howard would later say. It wasn't anger that grew inside him. It was resolve. Howard grew up knowing what it meant to go without. Hand-me-down clothes, shared bedrooms, a constant awareness that one wrong move could send the family spiraling. But poverty also taught him something powerful. It taught him observation. Howard watched how adults spoke when money was tight, how pride quietly disappeared, how dreams slowly shrank. He didn't grow up dreaming of being rich. He grew up dreaming of escape, not escape from work, but escape from fear. Sports became Howard's lifeline. Football, baseball, anything that gave him structure, discipline, and a temporary escape from reality. That discipline paid off. Howard earned a football scholarship to Northern Michigan University, the first person in his family to attend college. To the outside world, it didn't look like much, but to Howard, it was everything. College wasn't just education. It was proof that he could leave, proof that he could rise, proof that his life didn't have to end where it began. Still, he felt out of place. Many of his classmates came from families with connections, confidence, and money. Howard came from grit, but grit has its own kind of power. After graduation, Howard moved to New York City and took a job in sales at Xerox. On paper, it was a great job, good pay, prestige, security, but something felt off. Howard was succeeding, yet he felt empty. He wasn't building something. He was selling something. And then, almost by accident, everything changed. Howard took a job at a small company that sold coffee beans and equipment. The company's name? Starbucks. At the time, Starbucks was tiny, just a handful of stores in Seattle. They didn't sell lattes. They didn't sell cappuccinos. They sold coffee beans. But Howard noticed something strange. Customers were obsessed. They talked about coffee with passion, with respect, with ritual. This wasn't just a product. It was a culture, and Howard wanted to understand it. In 1983, Howard traveled to Italy. What he saw there would change his life. Coffee shops weren't just places to buy drinks. They were community hubs. People stood at counters talking, laughing, connecting. Baristas knew customers by name. Coffee wasn't rushed. It was experienced. Howard had an epiphany. What if we could bring this feeling to America? Not just coffee, but connection. Howard returned to Seattle bursting with ideas. He pitched a vision to Starbucks founders. They said no. They didn't want to become a cafe business. They wanted to sell beans. Howard was devastated, but something inside him refused to let go. So he did something terrifying. He quit. Howard started his own company, IL Journal. No money, no guarantees, just belief. He raised capital the hard way, knocking on doors, hearing no after no after no. Investors laughed. Coffee? Community? Americans won't stand at counters. But Howard remembered his father. He remembered what it felt like to be powerless. And he kept going. People came. They stayed. They returned. And then, in a stunning twist of fate, the original Starbucks owners decided to sell. Howard seized the moment. He raised the money. He bought Starbucks. And he merged his vision with the name. Howard didn't just want profit. He wanted purpose. He introduced health care for part-time employees, something unheard of in retail, stock options for baristas, respect for workers, dignity in labor. This wasn't charity. It was philosophy. We're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee. Once Howard Schultz took control of Starbucks, growth was no longer a dream. It was a storm. New stores opened not yearly, not monthly, but weekly. Seattle became San Francisco. San Francisco became Chicago. Chicago became New York. The green siren appeared everywhere. To the public, it looked like success. To Howard, it felt like pressure, because growth tests values. And Howard had promised himself one thing. We will never become the kind of company my father worked for. Howard believed Starbucks should be more than home and work. It should be a third place, a place where students could study, strangers could talk, people could feel seen. This philosophy guided everything. The lighting, the music, the smell of fresh coffee. Every detail mattered. Starbucks wasn't selling caffeine. It was selling belonging. As competitors focused on automation, Howard did something radical. He invested in people. Baristas were trained, not rushed. Names were written on cups. Smiles were encouraged. Critics called it inefficient. Howard called it human. And customers responded. In 1992, Starbucks went public. Howard Schultz rang the bell. But unlike most CEOs, his first thought wasn't wealth. It was fear, because Wall Street doesn't invest in feelings. It invests in numbers. Could value survive shareholders? Howard decided they had to. Chapter 15, The Pressure Scale. With thousands of stores, cracks began to form. Quality slipped. Stores felt rushed. The magic faded. Coffee machines blocked eye contact. Speed replaced connection. Howard knew it, and it haunted him. In 2000, Howard Schultz stepped down as CEO. He believed the culture was strong enough to survive without him. He was wrong. By 2007, Starbucks was overextended. Customer satisfaction dropped. The stock collapsed. The company had lost its soul. Howard returned as CEO in 2008. The world was in recession, and Starbucks was bleeding. He made brutal choices, closed 600 stores, laid off thousands, retrained every barista. One night, he closed all U.S. stores for training. Wall Street panicked. Howard didn't care. Howard brought Starbucks back to basics. Coffee first, People first. Purpose first. He removed automated systems, brought back espresso craft, reconnected employees to meaning. It wasn't fast, but it worked. Howard believed silence was complicity. Starbucks took positions on race, on refugees, on education. In 2018, after a racial profiling incident, Howard shut down 8,000 stores for racial bias training. Critics screamed. Howard stood firm. We will not be perfect, but we will be accountable. Howard faced backlash, political criticism, boycotts, personal attacks. But he remembered Brooklyn. He remembered his father, and he chose courage over comfort. Howard stepped down again, this time for good. Starbucks was no longer a startup. It was a global institution, but its foundation was intact. Howard Schultz didn't just build Starbucks. He redefined retail culture, employee benefits, corporate conscience. He proved you could scale values, that you could win without forgetting where you came from. Howard once said, "I don't want my life to be about money. I want to be about impact." The boy from the projects kept his promise. Howard Schultz's story reminds us of something vital. Where you start does not decide where you finish. Your past does not disqualify your future. And sometimes, the greatest companies aren't built from ambition. They're built from empathy. Because one man who watched his father lose dignity decided to build a company that would give it back. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why purpose matters, if it inspired you to believe again, like the video, subscribe for more real stories of resilience. And leave a comment. What part of Howard Schultz's journey spoke to you most?